Live streaming is on. Hello, world. My name is Gerry Fielka. It's February 26, 2021. We want to thank Clinton Ignatoff for facilitating today. Thank you, Clinton. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Lynne Sachs. Hello, Lynne.
Howdy. Nice to be here with you.
Yes, I love that word here. And so 13 years ago, I interviewed you in 2008, and I got through about a quarter of my 150 questions. So we're just going to dive right back in to the list. And the first question this time, Lynne, is what is the function of poetry?
I would say the intention and the gift of poetry is that it allows us to fragment and expand upon and circumvent and invent. And I think invent maybe is the most important part, the way that we communicate with each other. That any formula or template for language that has been given to us through the tried and true testing of that comes with like the syntax of the moment of the day is challenged. So like it comes from inside instead of being imposed on us, the way that maybe we could say prose is, or maybe we could just say generally conversation tends to go.
Lynne, you must have ESP because you anticipated the next question. A poet said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Oh, well, it's interesting. I write poetry, as you know, but I think that my inner dialogue, my language, is also very dependent upon my tea. Not really, but I'm just going to.
That was good timing.
Yeah.
I love it. And so that's funny because do you think you have ESP, by the way?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, oh, right.
I'm prescient. But so what my inner language, and I think all of us are poets in this way. I'm not trying to say that everyone is a poet, but everyone is engaging with the give and take of poetry. So I think my personal engagement with poetry has to do with being a very visual person. So I try to explore how I see the world by using words that allow other people to see what I see from my perspective. But I also love the sound of poetry, and I'm exhilarated by it. So it's both those things, that composite of why I'm also a filmmaker.
Yes, that was beautiful because, the woman who just knocked us out at the inauguration.
Oh my gosh, she was wonderful.
She did her poetry at Beyond Baroque, where you did your poetry workshop on film. Does that make us
shivers?
I know. Does that make us Venetians proud?
Yeah.
But it was the director of Beyond Baroque, Richard Modiani, who taught me this Gary Snyder quote, which sort of summarizes what you just said, but I'd love to get your reaction to it. My task as a poet entails the work of seeing the world without language and then bringing that seeing into language.
Whoa, that's Gary Snyder?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. That's fantastic because, historically, if you talk about the poet as the bard, it wasn't so much about seeing, it was about like a transmission of an oral history, oral, Aural. But I love that Gerry Snyder said that. So that's just fantastic.
Yeah. And so there's one other comment on poetry that I love to get your reaction to. Leo Bersani's Mallarmé study, he said, the very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition.
Whoa. Could you say that one more time?
I can, because I don't know what it means. That's why I always ask people what they think it means, but it seems to mean something.
Could you just say it one more time, and then I'm going to, oh, so good. You know what, Gerry, I thought I was going to embarrass myself by asking you to say that again. I was thinking, did I speak out on that, or is that just really complicated?
No, never. No, you never have to be embarrassed with me. You can always, because that's, my book that has our first interview in is called Strange Questions, but it should be called, from Mad Magazine's book, Snappy Answers to Stupid Questions. All my questions are stupid. Just ask Craig Baldwin. But this one is fun. The very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition.
Okay. So, if there's a crisis that is, I would say the crisis allows poetry. And that's kind of interesting, because you could say crises means moments of anguish, moments of turmoil, moments of revelation, are all the like synaptic experiences that are a form of crises. And that if you recognize those crises, then you give yourself this is so overused, but permission, or you give yourself the challenge to interpret that crisis through a language that doesn't exist yet. So, like, some people say, there's only so many crises. It's like, well, all the 10 things that might I don't know, that happen between birth and death. And then there's the crisis of loss. There's the crisis of war. There's a health challenge, all that. But if you take those things and you say these are worthy of interpretation, then I guess they offer that a kind of structure for that. So.
No, that was good, because I loved your changing permission, because, in the film festival world, they always go, well, Lynne, what informs your work? They love that word informs, like, what gives you permission? And it's like, I like the guy, Leo saying it sustains poetic composition. So we can't just put our camera down and then leave and hope it films something. We have, there's got to be some like crises or intention or permission, or, something, like we think we have to have an intention. Whereas McLuhan loved that line by the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can.
Oh, that's
that is like, so like, I'm not trying to, like, kids, little kids don't make art because, they're trying to get it on their parents' art gallery on the refrigerator door. They just make art,
I just want to add one thing. It's a detour, but I know you like detours. And that's that I did go to Bali in the early to mid 80s and I met people who had worked with Marshall McLuhan and knew, like, no, I'm sorry, that was Buckminster Fuller, but I know you're interested in Buckminster Fuller and Marshall McLuhan, so nix that. But anyway, I know those are two gods in your world, so.
But don't nix it, because you mean some anthropologists from Bali, or they were from America,
They were
you met.
actually not anthropologists. They were just people trying to live in a geo. This is so unrelated to Marshall McLuhan, but anyway, it's related.
No,
Yeah, it's Buckminster Fuller, but anyway, they lived in a geodesic dome that had been anyway. So this is a really big detour. Let's go back to your.
no, it isn't a detour at all, Lynn, because Bucky said all crew, no passengers, and Marshall often gets credited. So there's a lot of crossover in the world.
I knew they were important figures in your lexicon.
Yeah. And the woman who we're interviewing tomorrow went to the Bahamas with Bucky and Marshall. And Bucky.
Okay, so they were even friends. So I'm not totally off.
No, you're totally on, because Bucky talked for 8 hours. This series is named after it. It's called Media Ecology Soul Salon. And that's what Marshall called this conference he had in the Bahamas with Bucky and Marshall, and my friend Mary Jane Schultz was there, and she says Bucky talked for 8 hours. Everybody clapped, so he talked for another 8 hours. So I hope we can talk for many, many hours, but we'll move on. What first attracted you to write poetry? You grew up and your parents were turning you on to it. You're reading it. When did you go, tell us your route on getting to that point where you go, I can do this. I can write poetry.
I would say that my mother and father, particularly my mother, had an appreciation for poetry, but she was much more of a story person, a fiction, like someone who threw herself into a novel. We would go on like a family trip with my mother. My parents got divorced by the time I was 9, so I don't have a lot of memories of traveling with both of them. But my mom always encouraged that visit to the library with a stack of books this tall, and then we would all finish them, and then we'd take those books back. And actually, I think a lot about that, because I think during the pandemic, how are people supposed to get books at the library? It's just such a dreadful thing to think that those books are sitting there not being read. But poor things. But the poetry part really kind of came to me, I would say, because it's what I felt like flowed from me. That sounds strange, but I've never been someone who really relished the traditional storytelling with characters. I always wanted to know more about how the characters' minds worked and didn't work, and then I would be inside the head. I loved character. I loved reading fiction. Isn't that funny? There's some things you just so want to devour, but you don't want to do. So I never wanted to write a novel. I just love being in. I mean, I'm always reading a novel. I just read a novel that my sister wrote, but for me, writing was an extension of observing and reinventing. So poetry made more sense to my own personality. And then I started to go to poetry readings at the public library in Memphis. And so I think the 3 poets who I experienced and who left the biggest impact on me, because I was in the same room with them and that aura has an imprint, would have been Gwendolyn Brooks, who then became a poet laureate, Etheridge Knight, who was from Memphis, so I was kind of around him a lot. And I don't know if you know either of their work, but probably you might know Gwendolyn Brooks, maybe Etheridge Knight. And then, believe it or not, Robert Bly. And this was before he had started the men's movement. And he came and did a poetry workshop when I was in probably what we call junior high school. And I went to it and I just loved it. So those 3 poets were very, very influential.
That was well. Whoa, I'm getting See, you can turn down the volume and we'll try to get rid of that.
Wait, I didn't understand what you just said.
Are you hearing an echo?
Am I hearing what?
An echo.
Oh no, are you getting an echo from me?
Well, that's all right. We'll carry on because if you're not hearing it, the next question.
Can I ask you, are you hearing an ear echo from me?
I'm hearing an echo from me. Clinton might be able to help us, but if you don't hear it, then we can carry on.
Okay.
And so, sorry about that, Lynn. The next question is do thoughts create emotions?
It's so funny that you asked that because I just had a retrospective of 20 of my films at the Museum of the Moving Image. It's based in New York City, but of course, since we're living in the virtual times, it was available across the country. And the name of the retrospective was From Thought to Expression. Lynne Sachs retrospective, From Thought to Expression. And it's interesting because that connects to what I said earlier. It's not from story to expression, it's from thought. And that's how my work sort of gestates. It begins with a quandary, a possible experiment, a conundrum of sorts, and then it goes from there. But the curator, whose name is Edo Choi at the Museum of the Moving Image, named the retrospective that.
Wow. So do you think thoughts create emotions?
Yeah. And the thought that there's a thought that I'm most intimidated by. I figured this out a few years ago, but I was actually talking about it yesterday on a long drive I had up the eastern seaboard. But and that's dread. And that dread is the thought that most scares me more than fear, dread. And so that can create that can create for me a kind of emotion that I have a hard time not just reining in, but shaping into, let's say, an art making sort of gesture or something like that. I could actually make a film or write a poem about fear, but I would have a hard time with dread. It's like my worst.
Right. But is it almost like therapeutic for you too? You're like working things out for you inside psychological well-beingness?
That's a really interesting question because when I finished my most recent long film about a father who, someone in the audience asked me if it became therapy of some sort. And I actually got bristled at that. And I didn't like that because I actually have and still do go through therapy, and I have someone who helps me work out things. But I think that I have to allow the art making to be something different and to be to sort of flourish in its own spectrum or something, and not to offer back to me therapy. If I expect it to offer it back to me therapy, I have to be too nice to it, because I have to be nice to, you have to be kind to yourself, and so I'm a little harsher on my artwork than I would be if I were in therapy with it.
Wow, that was well put. And we've talked about intention in our last interview, but in this point, I'd love to ask you, what do you think the motive of the cave artist was? And is that changed?
Mm-hmm. Wow. If I lived in a cave, I wonder what I would do. That's what I'd have. Like, would I want it to be a movie theater? Would I want it to be just like a kitchen, a decorated kitchen? It's very interesting to think about because in general, it has to do with how you, like your register for what is home. And so one thing that's been happening a lot lately through this pandemic is that we're all home a lot more than normal, but even as more than we are normally, but as we like have become very, very, very intertwined, our lives have become so intertwined with our computers, our mobile computers. So home is a lot of us feel, if our telephone and our computer travel with us, then we could be anywhere. And that's pretty scary. So then you think, well, then what is the purpose of that cave? Because these were nomadic people. So if they're nomadic people, do they invest as much as we do in home? And like I'm thinking about it. So maybe when the cave dwellers were decorating and drawing on their walls, maybe, like Gerry, they were doing it for other people and not for themselves.
Yeah.
Because they weren't going to stay there. And if
Yeah.
they weren't going to stay there, then they did it as a gift. I had a student about 3 years ago. She was taking a filmmaking class from me, and we started to talking about why we make art. And she actually was not an art student. She was a student taking art. This was not necessarily going to be her life's work in any way. She just wanted, I don't mean just, but she intended to learn to make films, and then she'd take other classes and science classes, and she was finding herself. But she said the reason that she made art was that she wanted to have a gift to give to her family. And specifically, her parents had immigrated from Poland. Her grandparents were still in Poland, and she was making a film about them. But you could say that the drawings on the cave walls are a gift instead of decoration.
Yeah, you really, I know an interview's going great when either I or the person tears up, and it really made me tear up because Lynne, it made me, as kids or as students come into my lectures, I ask each one of them individually, what do you aspire to be, or what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And they go 3D animator, documentarian, blah, blah, blah. And one person goes, a good person. And I went, that's what Lynne Sachs is. First of all, she's just a good person and a great artist. But then the next woman said, a role model. And I goes, what do you mean? She goes, I want to feel that the kids in my hometown can look up to me and go, look at it. I come from a little town, and she became an animator, and I can look up to her and be an inspiration to other kids from my hometown. So I loved when you said home, that really was a beautiful way to express the answer to that question. But I want to ask you this question. Should we have the right to choose where we live?
Oh gosh, that's great. Oh, so I've been thinking over the last year as my life has become more and more virtual. Actually, my life is not virtual, but my way of interacting with other people has become virtual. Like, I actually feel that I'm spending the afternoon with you. I am like, we are going through this period where we must examine all the prepositions of our life. So I am with you, but I'm not with you, but I am with you. And like, what does that mean to be with you? And also location, words of location, like about travel and so if I could live you said if I could live anywhere, was that?
No, it's a
It's
funny
not if I
question. It says, should we have the
could
right
right to
to
yeah, yeah.
choose where we live?
So the reason I brought up the prepositions was I was thinking about all these words, like in the beginning of this interview, we I think it's an adverb here, yeah. Um, so we're here together, and then there's that famous Gertrude Stein expression there when she wrote in a poem, "There is no there there." She was actually talking about the place where she grew up, which was Oakland, California, and she was saying it in a very condescending way, like, there's nothing in Oakland, California. There is no there there. And it was hard, very snobby and haughty. And now she has a nice home on the Rue de Fleurus in Paris. And so she's there. She is there because she had the right to choose there. And so, or not the right, the privilege to choose her there. Whereas other people who are like born and raised or came to Oakland or anywhere but there, Paris, didn't have that. And I think that we live in a moment, it's called the refugee crisis. Like we live in a refugee crisis right now. So I actually think that any person who wants to leave the place where they are living or where they're experiencing pain or hardship of any kind should be able to migrate. And so I'm actually for a borderless world.
Yeah.
And so that is important to me. But I also think it's, especially for those of us who do creative work, and we can actually find home and solace and joy and inspiration anywhere. Like, any empty hotel room. I think if either one of us were talking to each other from a jail cell, that we were placed in or forced into, you or I, we would be miserable, but we also have this like quite active inner cosmos that we could dive into.
Really well put. And I so agree with you about the borderless world, but I got that question from a film called Problema. It's a 2010 film where they asked major thinkers and philosophers about 20 really important questions. And I always like that question because should we have the right to choose where we live? Well, most people go, of course. And I go, well, yeah. And I left Flint, Michigan 40 years ago and came to Venice, California. And I love Venice and I consider myself a Venetian, but I believe that I abandoned my hometown, that I should have stayed there. And look at what the crises they've gone through. I could be there, maybe being a political activist in the way that the people I learned about and you made films about in Flint, I learned about the Berrigan brothers and about activism. And your film on them truly inspired me and go, that's the roots of my activism right there on the screen. So it's a tricky question because people should be able to stay where they were born, like bloom where you're planted. And you really shouldn't wander. You should stay close to your heart. You're the ground you were born in. But of course we know there's many reasons to leave. Why did I leave Flint and come to Venice? And now I wouldn't move from Venice for the world. It's,
Well, I'll just say one other thing, that home can be solace. It can nourish us. When we return to that primal home of some sort, like way, way back, but we learn a lot about ourselves. But there's also a situation like Janis Joplin returning to the little town where she was from in Texas and being yelled at and finding so much hostility that it just really broke her down, because she had to run from that home. And I think about that too, because I don't want to idealize that home, because you think of all the African Americans who you know, wanted more than anything to return to the South because it was home, but then this home rejected them.
Yeah, it's complex. So, Lynne, do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Mm, I I'm trying to be really true to who I am, that I understand. I don't know if the people who live around me would answer this the same way, but probably meaning.
Yeah. Well, there's no right or wrong answers
I
to
know.
any of these questions.
I'm really
Wait,
doing my best to be authentic.
no, but that's it. There's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. Because no, I got that from Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He said, happiness ends, meaning can last. You know, we'll share this, like you said, we're sharing a couple hours, like you're still sitting here from 2008 in the very chair I'm sitting in, you were sitting in. And, you know, people can watch it on YouTube right when they're done watching this one and see the difference. And we that the meaning of that could last, but our time together ended. So the happiness of us being together ended, but the meaning can last. So I think that was fun. Now, does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling and we're creating it, or are we just detecting it?
Oh, I definitely could not have predicted your questions. You know, I'm a believer in science, but I'm not the most educated or informed. But I think detect.
It's there and we're detecting it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's like that expression or that notion of there being like the palimpsest. Is that the, you know, where you have a painting and underneath you have another layer and another layer which we don't see, but the aura comes through. And I think that that's that that level of consciousness is always there.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect chance to slip these in. This is 5 questions that Alan Watts asked. So just in sort of 3 to 5 words ish, kind of keep it brief. Who started it all?
Did you see that I closed my eyes?
Yes, that's good. That's
Okay,
good because the people watching this can hear that. Okay, go ahead and I'll tell you
I'll
later.
say collective and collaborative engagements.
Nice. Are we going to make it?
We will go forward into the future and we will make something
Where do we put it?
inside us.
Who's cleaning it up?
Oh, ooh. Each of us.
Is it serious?
Always.
Wow. I'm sure Alan Watts is creaming his jeans. That was great. But when you sort of looked like your face could have froze and you closed your eyes. Do you know what kids do now to play on Zoom? Because my friends' kids are like 7 and 8 years old, and that's how they play with their friends. They fake freezing on Zoom and see if you can figure it out. So
Wow.
that was like you close your eyes and it could have been, are you there, Lynne? Did you freeze? You know, the fun thing about Zoom is when someone freezes, their voice will catch up and everybody starts talking, oh, you're freezing. And then when the voice catch up is happening, they're being drowned out by everybody going, you're freezing. So I tell people, don't say anything, just wait. That gap is where the action is. That's where we can think, and
And I love
relax.
the figure of speech in English where we say freezing, like, here, put on your coat.
If God exists, what do you want God to tell you after you die?
After he died?
No, after you die. After you die, what would you like God to tell you if he exists?
Okay. Hmm. If the people I love are doing okay.
Nice. And Lynne, do you pray?
Okay. It all depends on how you pray. I don't pray to any being or anyone, but I speak to myself and I speak to my inner being in a way that is similar to praying.
Yeah. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's delightful. I would say not to be so scared of mean kids.
That is great. I got to tell you really quick, Martha Colburn goes, do you mean, do I have any regrets? I goes, no, just what would you say? She goes, quit drinking all that peppermint schnapps. But here's my favorite answer ever. That was really good, by the way. Lee Harvey Oswald's girlfriend, not his wife. This woman put out this amazing book and she was his girlfriend. It's all footnoted. It's not kooky, but all she got interviewed was about him. And I asked her all these philosophical questions. She couldn't believe it. And I says, if you're walking down the street and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say? She goes, I love you. And we both just broke down. That is an amazing thing because everybody wants to say something like, they usually go, oh, it's going to be okay. You're going to have a good life, So, what is faster, the speed of light or speed of thought?
Oh, I think the speed of light is faster than the speed of thought. I hope that's true because I like to let thought take its time.
Yeah. Well, I do appreciate because the style of interviewing you is comforting because I tell people in my pre-interview suggestions that silence is okay. And most people feel pressured to just talk right away and they don't center themselves. And you can feel that you're doing that. It's good. So Audre Lorde, the poet, said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest in regards to the quotes or not?
Oh, those two women, Audre Lorde and Yvonne Rainer, are absolutely heroes of mine. And I think Yvonne Rainer is, and Audre Lorde was a person who imbibed the act of thinking and creating. And if I were like the tools that I guess one thing that the tool I've tried to hold on to in my work is a tool that it's like a hook that reins in the reality I observe, but isn't so intimidated by it that I have to then project it back, but that allows me, and I think it's presumptuous, but the tool allows me to play with and explore and turn inside out the reality I see. So that's why I've always identified with a kind of practice a filmmaking practice that gives me a lot of freedom, not a lot of power.
Nice. Well put. So McLuhan learned from a poet that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. Like, oh my God, Clubhouse is taking over the world, and now we're not going to have Zoom anymore. You know about Clubhouse? Oh
No,
my God, it will take over the world in a second, but just like any new thing, it's like Zoom without pictures. So it's party line telephone calls, and 8,000 people could be tuning into this right now because they go, "Oh, I like Lynne Sachs, I like experimental film. I'll check this one out." So it's just like this ongoing thing that's like sweeping the world. So all these new contraptions, Zoom, we sort of love and hate Zoom, but it's enabled us to do things like this. We sort of love and hate spoken word, printed word, electronic word, movies. Kenneth Anger said, "The day cinema was invented was a black day for mankind." I love that one.
from him.
So we look to the artist to uncover these hidden psychic effects so we can learn to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. But McLuhan's main probe was, why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects, even though we can look to the artist to reveal them to us?
Yeah. The thing about most artists is that we don't really, we are not a race, but we are part of all races, I think, is that we don't think that what we have discovered is any better than what anybody else has discovered. In fact, we kind of just feel enthralled by the process of thinking in a new way. We enjoy thinking in a new way, but it's not the best way. And in fact, there's a book by a man named Ishiguro called The Artist in a Floating World. And it's a Japanese novel. And he actually got the Nobel Prize, I believe. But in the idea of the artist in the floating world is sort of this illicit world in which art has been exploited by politics, and so the one of the characters in the book actually succumbs to that and becomes a pawn of a very authoritarian state during a war. It's in that case it's World War II, and so there's a danger when art starts to think that it has a privileged understanding and a better understanding. That's or that it's that's the sort of risky part about the commercialization of art, because you could even say once it's used for political gain, then its value moves into this other form of like assessment. So yeah, I don't like to elevate the artist that way.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Auden, the poet, says basically said this paraphrasing, the mystery of art is we don't really know if it activates or pacifies us.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a very frank way of looking at art. And I think actually a lot of people probably think of art as very secondary to survival. And like every time we have a new president, don't you wonder, well, how does that president feel about art? Because
Yeah.
it's not part of their campaign or anything.
Yeah. Hey, Obama had Stevie Wonder and Aretha singing. I like that. And Biden says that James Joyce is his favorite poet. So how bad of a world can that be? And Kamala was inspired to be an activist by the Black Panthers. There's a few good things on earth happening.
There really are. They really are. That's good to hear.
So, Lynne, in your observations of humans, I know it depends, and of course, it's both. Do you think humans are more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
I think we as humans are more feeling beings.
Yeah.
And that the feelings push us to think.
Yeah. What is the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
Mm. Oh, Gerry, that is definitely a hard question to ask. If you asked me that question 12, maybe you did, but 12 years ago, it would be very different from today because I'm much more of this moment in which to be female is to embrace a certain sensibility, and to be male is to embrace a sensibility, but it isn't determined anymore by the physical self. So it has you desire your gender. You're not given it.
Yeah.
So I think of, I have to say that I've realized in myself that I'm very drawn to men with ponytails. No. Get it? No, I'm drawn to men for whom I would say, oh, he's great. He with that pronoun, he's great because he has embraced his feminine. You know what I mean? Like affection, nourishing, empathy. Those things are associated with the feminine. I mean, I really can't think of any adjective that we in our culture associate with the feminine and that is a pejorative. But it's just the way the culture. It's the feminine is celebrated, but it doesn't. It's not. It ultimately so far is not elevated. So it's different. Like if it were elevated more, I think we'd have a different society.
Yes. And why do women live longer than men?
Um, what if I answer that question? It doesn't necessarily have to do with me personally. I'm thinking about the women of the world, and so I think women tend to give themselves more opportunities to be nourished by like the social realm and our engagements with other people, to take love and to allow it to sustain us. And I think a lot of men treat love and appreciation in a more in a more like disposable way. So I mean, I think it had, I think that's just my thought.
No, that was good. In what caused matriarchy?
In the few times that we've had it, I have to say something about the idea of do you say matrilineal society? Yeah, a society in which it's very strange, but I think if you have a matriarchy, you actually have women who are trying to imitate men. And so I think that's kind of like, it's not if I understand what you're saying, like a matriarch, it's not something I aspire to. I don't want an archy.
Yeah.
So if we talk about, like the Amazonian women and that kind of like fabulation, call it, then it seems like those are women who are trying to emulate like a masculine or patriarchally defined society. So I think whatever caused it should be questioned.
Yeah. Well, yeah, everything should be questioned on the causality level, because when I ask people what caused patriarchy, Eric McLuhan, Marshall's son, said men. And basically, what caused patriarchy is biology is one of the answers. I tend to go, oh, that sounds right. But we don't know exactly what caused this. Oh, well, I'm the man, I run the show, so you get less money and blah, blah, blah. And then what caused matriarchy? Well, that was pre-patriarchy. And women were like, well, no, we give birth, and so we run the household. And the funny little twist on words, that words evoke more in their meaning, is the word mafia starts with the letters M-A, ma. And that's the funny twist is it symbolizes that women run the world, but they let men think they run the world. Now, I'm not saying that's true, but I think it's a neat twist, because it's sort of, I don't want to go too deep into this, but have you seen or heard Nina Menkins talk about female gaze?
No, I haven't.
Well, anyways, it just boils down to that women, and she's in the book too, Strange Questions, and she said that women frame films, make films based on the history of men making films. So I go, well, where did we get that framing aesthetic? How we frame a film and how we make a film? Well, then there's this woman, now I'm not going to get her name right, Alice she was like the
Alice
first.
G. Blanchet.
Thank you. Was she affected by the male gaze? Because she's making films 130 years ago, when film is first becoming an art form. Well, my theory is probably she was affected by the male gaze of paintings and photography, which was before her making films, which were dominant with male painters. Thank God for the Guerrilla Girls.
Yes.
Yes. So I mean, it is like, just off the top of your head, I mean, you frame your films from Lynne being a woman, or do you think you're framing your films, and I just don't mean literally framing, but the whole sensibility of making the film, is it based on, we've talked about Chris Marker in the past, and you've truly shown your mentors in your films, and you've talked about Barbara Hammer and all these great women filmmakers, but how much were all of them influenced by the fact that men were making films more before them?
You know, I have to say that I have actually probably less than typical, I would say, interest in mainstream film or commercial film. I have a low tolerance for it, and even below tolerance is interest. I love like a good European art film, or I love a really inventive, um, fiction film, but I'm not, and less am I interested in the most popular movies with the movie stars and that kind of saleability and that kind of escapism. The only reason I want to look at those kind of movies is for sociological reasons, is to understand how our culture works, but not for the art of it in any way. And I think actually Martin Scorsese has been going on these diatribes lately, and I love it, against what is being produced in our culture. For example, I heard the other day, he said, he decried the use of content to talk about or when people talk about the creatives, like in an advertising firm and all of that, as if it's just it it the is it that the art impulse is just to fill a void, to sell something. And so I get so upset and angry when I look at most movies created today that are truly consumed by thousands and thousands or millions of people, and it's really for the movie stars. That's what people want, and I am not trying to emulate that. So I feel like my heroes, my inspirations, the people who I measure my own like attempts to like make work, and in a similar vein, or like with the same, like I like that the artists in cinema that I consider awesome, and I do not like to use that word very much, have nothing to do with mainstream commercial media. And so I don't really have to think that I'm trying to break in as a woman. I'm trying to make my work. But women have been doing this for, as long as men, in the more alternative world. Like my cosmos that matters to me, and I know it doesn't matter to many people, is as welcoming of women as it is of men. Maybe that's something to think about. Maybe that's why that was the world I wanted to break into. But it's a world that makes me think and feel, and those other kind of movies barely do either one of them.
Yeah, really well put. And Lynne, tell me one major element of your creative output, your process, that stayed the same, and one major element that's changed over your decades of making art and poetry.
So I recently, had the chance to look at some of my earliest films again, which I could do anytime because I have them, but I looked at them kind of in the year 2021, and I looked at, for example, a film I made called Still Life with Women and Four Objects, which I made in 1986. And when I look at that, I'm actually kind of astounded at how many questions I was asking in a 4-minute black and white, 16 millimeter sound film that are still intrigue me. I'm still excited by, I was deconstructing cinema then. I was deconstructing it without even knowing maybe that word. And also because I was trying to figure out where I wanted to fit in. So the only way I could kind of grapple with that was to pull it apart like a scientist, right? So I look at that film and I see that I had a woman who was performing in it, and she does the same thing 3 times, and each time you start to understand. It's a kind of like a Yvonne Rainer repetition of a quotidian act that then becomes choreography. And I said, whoa, I was already interested in that. And that's the kind of thing I did in my film Tip of My Tongue in 2017. That is so wild. It's either I either didn't change at all, or I continue to be interested in those like daily actions and how they tell us something in a visual way, not, about how we manage in the world. And in that film, I have a picture of Emma Goldman, and I only learned about Emma Goldman around that time. And I was trying to understand how a picture of Emma Goldman could become some kind of talisman or opportunity for understanding feminism. Or is it just a picture? Is it just an object? Is it just a sign, like we would have said? Is it just a sign, or is it signified? It's only signified if you know who Emma Goldman was, rather than just that's an older woman with a bun. So those are things that I would still be thinking about today. And so I learn about the skin kind of changes a little bit, but not much. You're still who you are, even in your mid-20s.
Yeah, well put. So, Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness that you've incorporated to become a strength.
Whoa, I love that, because from what I know about Feldenkrais, the the intention or goal of the Feldenkrais program is to find balance and strength and ability to function in our everyday world and to grow old. I don't know. I guess I'd say with the wherewithal to be able to be independent, and so it's like physical skill building in the most absolutely fundamental ways. So the idea of recognizing our weakness and then trying to build around it is super interesting, and I really like that, because it's actually so I said skill earlier. It's actually a skill that will actually release you from the anxiety of failing. We're all so involved in anxiety because we think, if I have the discipline to try to do something, will I have the resolve to accept my inability to do that completely? So what I guess you're saying Feldenkrais is saying is to build around it. But I do wonder, since he was so interested in the somatic, like how he dealt with pain, because you can say all you want about pain, but that gnawing sense and must be excruciating. I don't know if you can make the best of pain.
Well, that's like, how do you flip a weakness into a strength, or how do you flip a rejection into a redirection?
Yeah.
So, but can you give us an example in your life, some weakness that you turned into a strength?
Mm. Oh, wow. Okay, I'm going to take a minute to think about that or so. Maybe this goes back to those ideas around storytelling. When people have talked about there are only 7 stories and they're like parables, or Ferdinand Saussure, I think it was, wrote about, about these paradigmatic stories, and that we're just telling and retelling them. And I'm more interested in fragmentation than I am in unified story building. So I remember writing little stories about witches when I was a kid, and two things I'll say, and I just was completely enchanted, shall I say, like that's a good word, huh? Enchanted, not with fairies, but with witches. But I didn't have I never cared what happened to the witch in the end. I just cared about how the witch like filled space and moved. The witch didn't have to go anywhere. And even when I think back on like the Chronicles of Narnia, which I loved, and they were really traditional stories. I was always interested in the passage into the wardrobe more than and into another world than to what happened. Like that happens to me all the time. People say, "But what happened at the end? What happened at the end?" And I'd say, "I don't even know. I don't even care because I'm worried. It's not worried, but I'm just involved in the call it the journey."
Yeah.
And so, like, I guess that's what my films are about. And I say, you know, I want like the end of my films to be opportunities for questions, not resolution around answers. So, but that took me a really long time to recognize.
Yeah, that was a really good example. Some great filmmakers said the film doesn't end when the film ends. It keeps going because if people keep talking about it. So that's the people do. And then the witches thing really evoked John Waters said he rooted for the Wicked Witch of the West and in the Wizard of Oz, and like nobody really rooted for. And look what he did. He cranked out like 30 pretty amazing films in their own unique way. So fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when
You learn to articulate it.
wow, articulation. You're good at that. Can you forget to die?
Never.
And this one's from Marcel Proust. On what occasion do you lie?
Mm, 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 mm. When I think that it will make someone I love survive.
Yeah. What a great word. Survive is a great word. Thank you, Lynne. So there's a saying that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. And James Joyce wrote this. It's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. But it was Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So, so how would
So
you?
good.
Yeah, I mean, Louis did it. But how would you react to this statement? I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but it said one creates what one resists. Not you, but you create what you resist. How do you navigate that thought?
Oh, I got to say that one line again. Thank God I'm an atheist. Louis Buñuel.
Isn't that a great one?
Yeah.
Because both him and Zappa, they just love to use hating their religion or spoofing or parodying or you know dealing with their religious background as part of their whole story. So that's like you create what you resist. They're resisting it, but that's what creates them. So it's sort of an example. But how do you react to that statement? You create what you resist. I'm not saying you, Lynne, but one creates what one resists.
Mm. Well, I've been thinking lately about the word ambition
Yeah.
because um, there the ambition is sort of both, it's simultaneously fashionable. You know, it's great to be a go-getter. It's great, especially it's interesting these days for women. You were talking about Kamala Harris, or Harris, and she's a really ambitious woman. And we used to say an ambitious person was an opportunist, and it's weird. It's sort of like, is an ambitious person just a very, very, very active person? Is an ambition, there's a kind of, it can be disparaging. Like, ambition means you covet fame or someone else's fame. You want to be better than somebody. Is it, do you have to be, for example, to be ambitious, do you have to be competitive? And all these words that don't necessarily connote a good person. But you could also look at the shift. I'm just speaking, I've never thought this before, but like Jesus was not an ambitious person, but Jesus Christ was a very ambitious person, because Jesus Christ thought that he was worthy and better than others, and had something to share, and believed in himself so intensely that he wanted to convince other people to also believe in him. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's like, to be a prophet, you have to be an ambitious person, but then you also think, but there's that side that says, that we live selflessly, and that it's better to be selfless, and it's better. So I think it's a kind of thing that I wonder about, especially, like, I'm an artist. I have a certain amount of ability to function in the world, and have been recognized to a certain extent, and not like in the big world, but to some of, is that because I'm ambitious, and is that bad? And I have a dear friend who says to me, if anything she wants to give her children, it's ambition. And she's not ambitious, but she regrets that she's not. And so it's an interesting word, because it's a word I kind of hate, but I recognize that people might think that I am that, and then that's problematic. I mean, it's interestingly problematic.
Yeah, no, you really answered that one well, because it flushed out a lot. I used to ask the question, is ambition based more on fear or joy? So it started, 40 years ago when I started interviewing people, I had two main questions, and that was the second main question.
That's so weird. You asked about that word.
Well, here's what happened though. It's got a big history, because I'm always trying to learn how to word my questions like better. But here's the funny thing, is ambition based more on fear or joy? Most people would go fear, and then that's it. It would end. There wasn't a lot of talk. And then I read Friedkin, the Exorcist movie director, says in Hollywood, he's really articulate guy. He's a smart guy. And he goes, in Hollywood, skill and luck have nothing to do with it. It's all ambition. And so then I changed the question to, how do you rate these three things in your life, Lynne? Skill, luck, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third? So I've shifted that talk on ambition. But even not to put that on you, I'm going to ask you this question. Can art making be egoless?
Okay, that's something that's changed in me. So I probably would have said that art making can be egoless up until like 10 years ago, or even more recently. But I see so many people who stop making art because they lost self-confidence. Not that they stop. So there's a funny thing in our world. Okay, there's art making that happens in a private world. Like, you make your art and you don't try to have your art recognized by the world. And we all are awed by that. I am really, really awed by that. And I don't call that, the term I can't stand is outsider art. I can't stand that. Or, and all the implications that come with outsider art.
Right.
So the thing is that if you make art in your own home just for you, or for a person who lives with you, or for your children, you still have to have an ego to believe that it's worth coming from here, from in here to out here. Just to get that far, from here to here, you have to have some ego. And if you don't have that, then you probably stopped like around the time that a little past your early adult life. And I don't think it's just that I got so many rejections, I just stopped. People say that, but if that was the only reason, then you would just make art because you had the joy to make it. But I think that you do have to have an ego, and sometimes this is a female insecurity. Sometimes I feel very, very, very embarrassed because I feel like it's not feminine to have that ego. Like, I don't know what kind of ego I have, but it had to be intact enough to keep going.
Yeah. Really well put. Thank you, Lynne. And so, how do you find peace of mind?
I find peace of mind in a couple of ways. I first and foremost, if the people I love are experiencing or allowing themselves to experience joy and good health, like like joy, like enough joy psychically and health, then I can actually go anywhere from there. But if I'm worried about someone I love and their health, mental or physical, I find it's very hard for me to have joy, and that's it. But then in my work is very connected to my joy, and if I wake up in the middle of the night, which I do a lot when I'm finishing a film, like film about a father who took me 2 years to edit. I woke up all the time in the middle of the night, all the time. And sometimes it was because I was so scared to finish the film and I kept telling myself I need to stop. But actually it was almost 50-50, the scared part, but also the figuring out of the strategy and like how to do something gave me extreme joy. Even if it was like how to cut one shot to the next. I like have these little, can I show you something? I mean,
sure.
This is the way my life works, right? So I keep all the yellow, like I write notes, probably one of these a day, maybe two. And sometimes one will cover me for a whole week. And I always use this kind of paper. So I keep them by my bed, and it drives Mark, my husband, crazy because I'm a note. But this is just, I mean, really, this isn't even all of it. And I made a film called A Year of Notes and Numbers, so this is just part of that. But when I could get like a teeny little idea, I write it down.
Well, Lynne, you did effect precede cause as well, because that's one of my earliest questions I forgot to ask you is, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night? So you really summarized that well. But tell me, one major thing that you've learned raising you raised two daughters.
Mhm.
What's one major thing you learned
Mhm.
raising your daughters?
Oh, what a wonderful question. Um, I have some friends who are parents, and they say your daughters are always your daughters, and then you can be friendly with them, but they're not your friends. But I feel such extremely profound sensations of like happiness when I connect with my daughters as friends. And I try not to depend on them, and like maybe I would depend on my friends, but I love what they do. I love the way their minds work. Um, and I also love that I'm at a point where I think I gave them enough, Mark and I gave them enough the tools to be good people, and to be to be like pretty tough too. So
Yeah.
tough in a good way, and they have like just really they have a lot of resolve and curiosity, and so
Beautiful. And talk about good people. How do you explain your longevity with the great Mark Street as your husband? How many years have you been together,
this
and
is
how do
our
you,
this is our 30th year.
wow, how do you explain the longevity?
Ah, um, there's a few different things, but um, this has to do with something you talked about earlier. Mark and I can go on a long drive and have something to talk about across the country, but we also can sit quietly and not feel like that there's a lacuna of some sort, and that we're going to fall into it. I enjoy when he's in his own head and trying to figure out his life or something he's working on or some dilemma. And he appreciates that too with me. And another thing that I think we figured out is, how to fight. Like we actually, we fight plenty, and we also are verbal enough that we know how to make up, and we can express ourselves to each other, and we don't hold anything in. And then I guess I would say lastly, that we like still get a kick still, or we get a kick out of like the kind of tickling, making each other laugh and being physical together. And like right now, I've been gone for a month. I got back yesterday. I was taking care of my father for the last month. And so we're kind of quarantining, but we still are like performative, and we're like this and all this, but not really touching, but kind of touching. And, we're trying to follow the rules of social distancing, even though we're in the same house right now. So, we understand each other very
Yeah.
well.
Well, that was beautiful. I'm going to ask a few more, then we'll bring Clinton on, and then I'll ask the remaining two. But it's really been fun, Lynne. Um,
I
if
have
a
been
public,
looking forward to this for a month since we planned it, more than a month.
well, good. I hope we can do it again, and not wait eight more years. Or yeah. So
I have to
if a
tell you
public,
one thing,
go
because
ahead.
the interview you did with me is on YouTube. So just recently I saw that it's been embedded in probably two or three places where people had to find an interview with me just to like, give some kind of website or like a context. So it's interesting, Gerry, how much that has floated.
I love it. I'm all for that floating. If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
um, hmm. Well, I'm just going to answer it because I had this retrospective recently, and I really appreciated the title. So I'm going to use that, From Thought to Expression.
I love it. And they want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell would it be?
Oh, almond.
Oh, wow. If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Oh, ooh, what a fun question. If a statue were, uh, hmm. Okay, I'll say something. There's a film that the filmmaker John Vito made. I think it's called The Whispering. Do you know that film? He made this film in which he went to look at the grave sites of all of these renowned leftist radicals, like all over the world actually. And he wanted to see to what extent they had been recognized, and it included Philip Berrigan. That was the very last one. And he and you know he it was very like renowned and not so renowned, but people definitely of the left whom he deeply admired, and most of them were sort of in a field covered up by grass. So I guess I would want my the monument to me to be in a field covered up with grass, and I wouldn't care where on earth it was, just as long as it was in a field covered up by grass.
Very sweet. I used to just say, a statue, and then my wife's mother said, "Well, I would like it to be pebbles in a stream," you know,
Nice.
and I was like, that made me say, "Well, what would it be made of?" So that was beautiful. I loved. I could really picture that image of the grass growing over like that.
Mhm.
So, Lynn, tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Mhm. Something good I never had. Oh boy, I never. Um, Wait, can I ask for a certain do you mean good like I'd have to define it the way I want it defined.
You, I love people who answer their own question. Yeah, you put the word good into the context you want to.
Okay.
Yes.
Trying to do this the right way, right? And I know there's a right way. Something good I never had. Um,
And you never want it. It's good, you never had it, but you never want it.
okay. Um, I actually never wanted anything that you would call luxury,
Yeah.
like a luxury item
Yeah.
with a capital L.
Yeah.
I don't really like things that you're told will give you those kind of pleasures. They seem like very conventional pleasures.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah, that was good because the answers I get the most are fame, money, and heroin. But one answer I'm getting a lot now is a yacht. So that's a luxury item. That's
Yeah.
similar.
Well,
Yeah.
basically, I kind of said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
No, but you put it in good terms like luxury. So I'm going to ask you one more and then we'll bring Clinton on. So Joseph Boyce said, make the secrets productive. And Lou Welsh, the beat poet, said, guard the secrets, constantly reveal them. But it was in 1928, Thornton Wilder said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell this one secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. Lynne, you've been really honest. You've laid your cards on the table for 85 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't said this, but what's it really all about for you?
Well, I do want to kind of explore that question or that relationship to secrets.
Yes, please.
I did just finish a film that that laid bare secrets that I, for a long time, didn't know. The film is film about a father who, and it's that ellipsis afterwards, which is like all the secrets, and so I guess that if you had the the you said what's it all about for you?
Yeah, it's sort of it's really a bullshitty question because it's like,
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying.
I'm trying to look at your buildup.
Yeah,
Um, so the thing is that when we are moving through the world, either as artists or other people, we're always deciding to what extent we are going to be vulnerable.
yeah,
And so so if we don't reveal many secrets, we think that we're less vulnerable, and that will give us protection. But I actually think that allowing for that openness, and I don't mean strictly transparency, but that willingness to let our most fragile selves into the elements ultimately gives us like another layer of strength and like ability to have a form of realization. So, and I'm actually not the best at that in any way. You know, I mean, people. I don't know that I share everything, like, on my sleep. I'm not sure, but I think I'm trying to do it more. Um, so, like, how many times a day do you decide not to say something or not to do something? Um, so, um, and also to do good things, like, because there's been a lot in like America, in our society, like in America lately, where people, like on January 6th, they've just like, I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and I don't mean that. I just mean that that expression I've heard recently, where you say that something's at stake, and it has it has meaning, or the decision you make has meaning. So I'm keen on that. Um,
yeah. That was good, Lynn, because it brought up a couple things. That word vulnerable is so deep in everything that I study, and I just can't figure out what it means, but I want to know. It's multi-layered, and it is like we're trying to reveal the secret and hide it at the same time. That's a little, you handled that well, but really what it evoked was that Alice Walker quote that I'm paraphrasing that says something like, I love you, mother, because what you did to me was you showed me your weakness, and that was your greatest gift to me. That you were able to fail in front of me and say, look, I'm a mother, I can fail. And that was your greatest gift, which is like such a heavy thing to say,
yeah,
because you want to look up to your parents and you don't want them. And I know your film, I mean, I was just ecstatic when you got a review in the New York Times. I was like, yeah. That was cool, because
I
it
would
was like,
too.
hello. That is like, so Clinton, we're going to bring Clinton on, and then after his question or two, I will sum it up with two more. Thank you so much, Lynn. That was amazing.
Yeah, it's been wonderful getting to know you for the last hour and a half there, Lynn.
You got
Just
a jump start, Clinton.
hey.
Jump start right into my mind. Boing.
Well, after that last answer you gave, I mean, how can I hold anything back? Really, it's been very provocative. I started taking notes, and then I just ran out of. I wasn't gonna fill my little flip book of stuff because your answers are very provocative. And I love how Gerry's questions tended to jump all over the map with stuff. So really, like for instance, I'm just very much more of the sort of person who likes to think, believe that my thoughts have got a good lockdown on my feelings, and then secure in that, I'll let myself be vulnerable, trusting myself to not make a fool of myself. Right? I think we're very opposite in a lot of ways. Now, what is it you respect most about someone who's stands the furthest away from you, or what is your ideal? Like, if there's this idea that opponent processing, or that two people need to be complementary, or if opposites attract, or in that realm of thinking, what could you say about someone who was going to fight you on the idea that you don't want archies, for instance, in the abstract? What's your ideal opposite?
Oh my. Um. Um. Well, this isn't. I actually been thinking a lot about who I am in nature and whether I'm like a transcendentalist poet, or where I take from nature in order to understand my soul or other people's soul, and in a way that's kind of like ridiculous. Why can't I just be in nature and appreciate and be in it and not think what I can take from it? And you know, I would actually like it if I were um, more capable of being in places where there is no culture, because I'm so like Gerry or we're so enthralled by how human beings have created culture and the like edge of it, and the complications and the surprises and the ingenuity and all of that. And I would like to find my way in the forest. I love walking through the forest, but sometimes I'll say I love to walk through the forest because I get such great ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Or that it's like an opportunity. I love that because I figure things out, and I would like to be more of a person in the in that in the environment who can just be in the environment. And so I just love that, like the little Gerry Fialka playing with that tree on the drawing behind his head. That's your drawing, I'm guessing, right?
That is my niece's drawing. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Oh,
you.
maybe
That is the
yours when you were a kid or something.
it's authentic children's drawings, which I dumpster dive daily. Kids get all their art thrown out, so I get to be a curator and find all this great
Excellent.
art.
I love
But
that.
Lynn, what you said was amazing, because when I went to college in Ann Arbor the year before I started, they said, "Oh, you're a high school student. You can go practice being a college student for 2 weeks." And I was like, "Wow." And they taught me this thing called existentialism, which I didn't know, Sartre or Camus or whatever. And it was really Zen or Eastern philosophy based. And they said, in the West, we go up to the rose bush and we pick the rose. In the East, they go up to the rose bush and smell it. They don't need to take it, you know.
Yeah. Yes, and I would like to be more like the Eastern.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, I guess, my opposite, but I'm an appreciator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that was a great question, Clinton. Thank you so much. So, Lynne, two more questions and we're out of here. It's really been a delight. And what's the healthiest cultural shift you see developing today?
Oh, God. As you mean, as of November 3rd.
Yeah, that could be it.
I really feel it. I really feel it. Like, I think, well, I do think the pandemic has been a year of horror and also a year of introspection for many of us. And I think that we're going to have to adjust to being social beings again. So that's like, I think that 2020 is going to be comparable to like, you know, the the year of Jesus Christ's birth. You know, like, okay, this 2021 years ago, that happened. I mean, to me, what's the big deal? Really, it's crazy. It's so artificial. But I think this, I would have said 2001 after like 9/11 because there was a kind of new fear zone and distrust and things. But now I think 2020 has been such a rupture, at a kind of sense that we are all on one earth, and it's profound. There's no way nobody could ever say that this ever happened again, where we felt connected to every single person on the earth, every single person.
Yeah.
And that's the moment we're in, and it's going to be interesting to see where that takes us. I mean, I could definitely talk about some positive things that have happened because we have a new president, vice president, and there's like a new language. I heard that he has eliminated the word alien. Yes. We're talking about people from other countries, that he's now allowing LGBTQ to be a point of distinction and defining of self. And those are really great, but those things might pass. It might do another. And like Clinton, you were asking about the opposite. You know, that could go like that in 4 years. We don't know. But this other thing where we are part of a big single earth is, I hope, something that we can give us a chance to like understand each other better. I really hope so.
That's good positiveness, and I appreciate it. Lynne, what gives you the most optimism?
You know, when I think about this kind of paradigm for my day, like a day or a period of time, I often think about something that I'm wistfully trying to see happen. And so if it's something that is like maybe going to make our lives better, and then I think other people are in that, like I used the word collective before. I'm really interested in when we work collectively. So if I think, and it has to do with how you were saying, do I pray? Like, I don't pray to God, but if I think I'm collectively praying for like something holy, like I don't think anything's particularly holy, but if we're all cultivating a sense of holiness,
sacredness, maybe.
What?
Sacredness, maybe.
Yeah, sacredness. You know, like in Judaism, they talk about this period of awe, like the days of awe around Yom Kippur, like where you think about what could happen, what might be, what we did wrong. So I think optimism has to come with a layer of recognition of trying to address what we could make better in ourselves.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure, Lynne, and you're always inspiring me to make myself better. Want to thank Clinton, and once again, Lynne, thank you so much. I hope we can do this again soon.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to say, is the recording done?
Oh, I haven't hit the button yet. Go ahead.
I'll just say to either of you, I used to have all my films on my website, like completely available for anybody to watch, but because some of them are, because of this virtual world we're in now, like that I have to put passwords on some things because if they're screening somewhere where someone has to pay even $5, they don't want them on my website for free. So I had to like shift that a little bit in order. And actually, one of the reasons that is important is I really want to help the cinemas that we love. Like now they're working virtually, so they need every penny they can get. So if I can help that, I'm trying to do that. But if there's anything that you want to see of mine, I know you're super busy, but if you want to, even my new film about a father who, just tell me, and I'm happy to share anything that I have.
Wonderful.
That is so nice. You've always been so generous and been a big support to me. Thank you for that bonus. Okay, Lynne, thank you. That was really fun.
This has been very thought-provoking.